I was really excited when this showed up at my door the other day, and my wife saw the box for it, and she goes, "Is that another pedal?" And I started explaining how, yeah, it is a pedal and it has some effects, but it's also an amp simulator and an IR box and a power amp and a USB interface. And then, in the words of the late, great Mitch Hedberg, I realized I should have just said, yeah. Alright, so the first guitar you heard in there, that was that snazzy Ibanez Talman. I used the classic channel in the amplifier section, more on that later, and no other effects. And then for the lead, I grabbed my Reverend Jetstream and I used the USA mode. I also added in some phaser, some overdrive, and a little bit of delay and reverb. Just a little bit. To be totally honest, towards the end of last year, I was starting to feel a little bit burned out from doing pedal video after pedal video after pedal video and just rushing from one to the next to the next. So I wanted to do a video on something where I could really devote a whole bunch of time and explore all the features. So as you probably noticed, this is a pretty long video, but there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about in here, and I think you're going to find it really interesting. So this is the Blackstar Dept 10 Amped 2. And what exactly is this? Well, the best thing we can do is just start by looking at it. You can see up here we've got an amplifier and a power amp section, and then there's drive, modulation, delay, and reverb effects, plus a little OLED screen down here, and it's got a built-in tuner. So it kind of looks like a very basic multi-effects pedal. Nothing I would expect anyone watching a channel like this to get excited about yet. Let's dig into that amplifier section a bit, because this is kind of like the foundation that everything else builds on top of. So we've got a good set of controls on here. We've got gain, bass, middle, treble, master, and then there's a selector here for the type of amplifier. Now, looking at these three options, you know what they mean. I know what they mean, and that is indeed what they mean. So let's get started with probably my favorite setting on here, the USA model. And then right below it, let's take a look at the UK model. Now, this brings in a little bit more overdrive, but it's not super saturated. The beauty here is really in the dynamics and the chime of it. And if you're looking for gain and saturation, well, that lives in the classic model on here. Now, before getting to all the rest of the knobs and the switches on here, let's shift our attention to the back of the amp too. There's our in, there's our output, there's an effects loop, and they're even kind enough to give us two 9-volt outlets totaling 500 milliamps for whatever other pedals we might want to throw in the loop or out in front of this. That's very considerate. Now, over here, these are our cab rig outputs. So these take all the effects and preamp options from the front and add in cabinet emulation. So now we can plug in headphones, line out, XLR, and it will emulate a whole mic'd rig, effects, amp, cabinet, all that. There's even a USB-C port on here so we can plug directly into a computer and let this act as its own audio interface. That all makes this a pretty good desktop system, but now picture you've got band practice or a gig or you just feel like being loud. You could run the XLR out into a board or into a keyboard amp or something like that and go direct, but look what we've got to the right side of this little fan here. Yeah, there's 8 and 16 ohm outputs back here, which we can drive at 1, 20, or 100 watts. So now we can put this on top of an amp cabinet or just down on the floor and let this drive the speakers directly. And that sounds pretty cool, but only if it really works. And I wanted to put it to the test. So I brought it over to my pal Jeff Fry's recording studio, Black Sheep Recording Studios in New Paltz, New York, where Jeff was more than happy to let me let things rip in his big, wide open, acoustically treated live room. I got to really sit down and explore the amplifier section with all the variations at different volume levels. And for recording, it might not take the place of the real thing, but having all that sound from something this compact is very appealing to my practical side. And I realize I'm saying that I have a practical side when I just put out a video about a Korg Miku, but I guess you'll have to trust me. So big thanks to Jeff over at Black Sheep Recording Studios for letting me play with all of his toys and giving me a peek of how it's really done. That's him right there, hard at work producing some Christmas music. Say hi, Jeff. Hopefully we get to collaborate on a few more things this year. I also wanted to see how this would work in a real live band situation, so I brought it to practice, and I had our guitarist Claude rock this through the Marshall cab instead of his regular combo amp. We basically left it on the classic mode using the built-in effects, no other pedals at all, and not only did it sound great, but set to 20 watts with the master volume knob right around the middle, it was perfect for keeping up with our drummer, who is actually known for hitting them pretty hard. So 1 watt, perfect for at-home practicing and writing. 20 watts, ideal for band volumes with a live drummer. And I'm assuming the 100 watt setting is for when you're playing a stadium where they don't believe in miking amps or something, I guess. All right. So now we know what this thing is all about and how it can be used. Let's get into those effects. This is an effects show. Starting with the drive section. Now, we'll use this switch right here and this section here to select the type of drive. So we've got boost, drive, and fuzz. And down on the right side here is a really nice bright OLED screen that shows us exactly what we're adjusting and what the levels are. So here's a taste of the drive options, starting with the boost. So the boost is there just to fill out our sound and maybe push the amp into clipping. Drive gives us that steady, crunchy overdrive, and fuzz, well, that's just fuzz, man. And right below that, we've got a couple of modulation effects. You know I like my modulation effects. The first one is a chorus slash flanger. What? So on the left side of the depth knob is chorus, and then as we cross over the middle here, it turns into a flanger. So here's what that sounds like. There's also a nice tasty tremolo, and I don't think this is a straight up amplitude tremolo. I'm hearing a little bit of rotary effect in there as well. Whatever it is, I like what I hear. And of course, you've got to have a phaser. So here's our phaser with a little bit of overdrive mixed in, just to keep it classy. We've got three different types of delays in here. Let's start out with the first one, which is a very straight ahead digital sounding delay. It's called linear. Then we got an analog setting, which is a little bit darker and more mysterious. And then lastly, the shimmer setting for those science fiction space vibes. Did you catch that at the end there? Yeah, we can hold down the delay button and it will infinitely sustain whatever it's been repeating. And we can also use the, where is it? The time knob to set the delay time, or we can tap tempo it in up here. And if we hold down the tap tempo button, we can turn the time knob, and this is where we can set our subdivisions. So that's your dotted eighths and all that kind of fun stuff. And then we've also got some reverb over here. So let's start out with a room reverb. How about some of that spring reverb? And lastly, my favorite, plate reverb. And oh yeah, the reverb has a bit of that button hold freezy thingy feature as well. In addition to the amp types, we've also got a response switch. Different amps use different tubes in their power amp section, and those tubes have different characteristics in terms of distortion, saturation, and compression. One might typically want to match the EL34 with the classic amplifier mode, the EL84 with the UK, and the 6L6 with the US, since those are the types of tubes you would typically find in those amps. But I kind of like the fact that we can mix and match here. Besides, I got a PV Classic 30 that I love, and I think it sounds more like a Fender than anything. It uses EL84s, and my Fender Blues DeVille and my PV 5150 combo, those both take 6L6s, but I can't think of any two amps that sound more different than those two. So just think of this as an additional voicing option for our amp section. Right above those power amp outputs, we find two MIDI ports in and through. And if it's okay with you, can we just assume that somebody who's not me will find those helpful? I mean, I'm pretty nerdy, but my nerddom has its limits. What I do want to get into, though, is the software. Because when you connect this to your Mac or PC with the free Architect software, it brings up this neat interface which does two important things. First, you can take whatever you're doing with all the knobs on here in real life and save them as presets. So as I've been writing and recording demos for this video, I've been able to take kind of snapshots of everything, save them with a name, and bring them back up as needed. This also lets me adjust a few of the deep options on here, like whether I want the delay time to be in milliseconds or BPM, where I want the effects loop to be in the signal chain, stuff like that. The other half of the software is for the cab rig configuration. We can pick any speaker configuration, mic type, mic placement, room options, and then we can save those into these slots. And those correspond with the positions of this switch back here. So even when we're not plugged into a computer, we can cycle between three saved cab simulations. We can also test our luck and see what it comes up with randomly. I warned you this was going to be a long, in-depth one. We've got one more demo jam, and then we'll meet back, wrap things up, and exfil. first guitar you heard in there was that Reverend Jetstream, and I was using the USA amplifier model, flanger modulation, and plate reverb. And then for the lead, I followed that up with the G&L ASAT, going through the UK model with overdrive and analog delay. I think the real benefit of a system like this is in what it could potentially replace or streamline. Now, don't get me wrong, put the pitchforks away. When I'm daydreaming about my ideal rig, I've got a pedal board the size of Kansas, wired to a quadraphonic amp rig, and the crowd just noticed my top-mounted jack, so they're going absolutely bonkers. But that sometimes doesn't line up with the reality of what I can fit into the trunk of my car, or how many trips I can safely make across an icy sidewalk and down some collapsing rotted wood basement stairs. A system I can use at home for writing and recording and practicing, and then take to practice, and then take to the gig in the evening, that solves a lot of real world problems. Now, if you've watched my channel before, you know that I'm a big fan of presets. And you know that I like my presets easily accessible. As far as I can tell, there's really no way to do that with this outside of using the Architect software. Maybe that's what the MIDI is for, but I really wish it were built into the bass controls here. I mean, we've got this really nice, bright, clear OLED display here, but it's really only showing anything when we're adjusting knobs or using the tuner. How about giving this a few kilobytes of memory and incorporating that into a preset management system? Or if that's not possible, what about using it to show input and output levels so we can avoid clipping? These are things that could be addressed in future firmware updates, so fingers crossed, please. If that does change, I'll update this video with that information. If you want to learn more about the Amped 2, just head over to blackstaramps.com. They've got all the information you could want. Or if you want to pick up one of these, or any piece of gear really, head on over to zounds.com. Make sure you use the affiliate links in my page bio and video description. They were the ones that set this all up, so we love them for that. Big thanks to Jeff at Black Sheep Recording Studio, but most of all, thanks to you, the viewer and the commenter and the thumbs upper and the subscriber, for making this channel fun for me, for all your comments, your questions, your requests. It's a fun distraction from everything else, and I always like having a project to work on for myself. So until next time, I'll catch you on the next one.